Welcome to today's lesson, and in this lesson we're going to look at rivers. So you should know that a river is a stream of moving or flowing water in a channel. Of course, you know that for water to flow and form a river, there must be a channel that starts as a valley or something, and then it's filled with water. Rivers flow from areas of high altitude to areas of low altitude. So we're going to look at a few aspects of a river, and these are some of the terms that you should know when we talk about rivers. The river basin, the watershed, the confluence, the tributaries, the distributaries, the river system, the river mouth, the drainage basin, and many more. To start with, the source. This is the point from which the river originates, or where the river starts or begins. So rivers can begin from a lake, a spring, of course a spring that is underground water that oozes onto the surface, melting water from ice, maybe from the top of high mountains, or from a highland region which receives high rainfall. Tributaries. Now, tributaries are the branches of a river. Actually, these are smaller streams that flow and join the main river. So for a river to start from maybe a highland or anywhere, we will have smaller streams that will flow and join the main stream before they finally form the main river. Now, these are what we call the tributaries. Confluence. A confluence is the point where one river meets another, or where a tributary joins the main river. So that point of contact between one tributary and another one to form the main river is what we call the confluence. If it were a road, we would call it the road junction, but now for the rivers we call it a confluence. Next is the river system. A river system is the river plus all its tributaries. Whatever makes up that river is what we call the river system. So it is the main river plus the smaller tributaries that finally join up to form the main river. So next we have what we call the drainage basin. And what is a drainage basin? Well, this is the area within which a river obtains its water. So you will notice that a river system is found within the drainage basin, and that is to say that the main river plus its tributaries obtain water from a given drainage basin. So next we have the watershed. So this is an island area that separates two or more river systems. So any river that originates outside the watershed will definitely drain its water into another river. So for example, we see like this is a typical river, and we have the watershed that just separates this river system. So should we have some river that originates from somewhere around this region, then this river now doesn't flow into this river because it is outside the watershed for this river. So it goes into another river which maybe is flowing to another direction in that case. So that is what we call a watershed. And then, so we look at a few examples of the river basins in Kenya. Of course, we have quite a number, but some of them are, we have the Lake Victoria Basin. We also have the Rift Valley Basin, Athi River Basin, Tana River Basin, and the Ewaso Nyiro Basin. So that is, we have rivers that within the lake region that will always drain their water into Lake Victoria. Of course, we'll look at that later. We also have quite a number of rivers that take their water to the Rift Valley. And then we have rivers, of course, which will take their water to River Athi, and those which take their water to River Tana and the Ewaso Nyiro. So those will form the major basins that we have in Kenya. So the next feature about rivers is what we call the mouth of a river. Of course, this is where the river empties its water. So we understand that rivers will empty water into a lake, swamps, seas, or oceans, you name them. So the point where the river empties its water, that is what we call the mouth. And a river mouth can be through one straight channel, that is what we call an estuary, or it can end up splitting into several river mouths, and that we will call a delta. So we also have what we call a river distributary. So, okay, you understand we talked about the tributaries earlier, now we have the distributary. Now this is a river that comes from the main river and does not join that river again. So that is what we call a distributary. It splits from the main river and flows into another direction. For example, let's say this is the main river, and then we have a river that originates from here and then flows towards a different direction. Now in that case, we will call this a distributary. Now we have two types of drainage. Drainage can be external or drainage can be internal. Now let's look at internal drainage. Now this is where rivers drain their water into lakes which have no connection whatsoever with either seas or oceans. So these rivers drain their water into lakes, not any ocean or any sea. Now that is what we call an internal drainage. External drainage is where rivers drain their water into oceans and seas. Having looked at that, we want to look at specific rivers in Africa. And of course, you understand that Africa has very many rivers. So some of them are permanent. That means they have water throughout the year. Others are seasonal. So they only have the water maybe during rainy season, but then they dry up when drought comes. So of course, looking at the order of the rivers in Africa, we have River Nile. River Nile is the longest river in Africa and also the longest in the world, if not second to Amazon River. And then we also have River Congo, which is second longest. And then River Niger. And finally, River Zambezi, so which is coming up at number 4. Of course, we'll look at some of them into details, but then that is coming up later. So in saying this, you must note the difference between the length of the river and the size of the river. The size majorly depends on the volume of water that this river holds, that is the width of the river. So you need to note that River Congo was formerly called River Zaire. That was during the reign of Mobutu Sese Seko. But then the name was later changed to River Congo. So River Congo is known to be the largest river in Africa and second largest in the world after Amazon River. That is by the volume of water that it holds. Congo River has the largest volume of water. It's also the river with the largest estuary and also with the largest number of tributaries of all the rivers in Africa. We also note that Congo River has two major sources, that is Ubangi River, and another source is Lake Tanganyika. So that is to mean that River Congo is an outlet of Lake Tanganyika. So let's see some of the rivers that end in deltas. Of course, we said that a delta is when the river empties its water using several mouths, more than one. They can be 2, 3, and many others. Such rivers are, we have River Nile, Niger, Kuja River, River Tana, River Zambezi, River Rufiji, and River Omo. Of course, later we will learn how deltas form. Of course, that is as a result of deposition of the materials that later splits the river into several channels. And that can only be possible in a lowland region where the speed of water is very low, and so the river does not have the strength to carry the materials which were eroded while the river was moving from the steepy areas. Of course, we have a mnemonic to help us understand these rivers that end in deltas, and so the formula is here. You say nini kutazaruo. Nini kutazaruo, now that is for river Nile, Niger, Kuja, Tana, Zambezi, Rufiji, and O stands for Omo. So you must not confuse O for River Omo and River Orange. That one you must not. Now, of course, if a river does not end in a delta, then it has to end in an estuary. So rivers that end in estuaries, there are so many. And so you will pick the rivers that are not in our list, but you know they exist in Africa. Of course, they'll end in estuary. So quite a number of them are, we have River Volta, Congo, Senegal, Gambia, Orange, Limpopo, Ruvuma, Kunene, Athi River, and several other rivers. So rivers in Africa, of course, drain their water, some into the Atlantic Ocean, others into the Indian Ocean. We have those that drain their water into the Mediterranean Sea. We also have the inland lakes. Of course, the inland lakes are like any other lake, like Lake Victoria, Tanganyika, Turkana. And then we also have those which drain their water into the swamps. Now, let's start with the rivers that drain their water into the Indian Ocean. Of course, these must be the rivers which are found in the eastern part of Africa. Most of these rivers will drain their water into the Indian Ocean. Now, we want to look at which rivers they are, of course, starting from the top part of Africa. So we have the first one is River Shebeli, which starts from Ethiopia and then flows into Somalia, and then finally drains its water into the Indian Ocean. After Shebeli, we have River Juba, another river which comes from Ethiopia and then flows through Somalia into the ocean. So the first two rivers there, Shebeli and Juba, of course, are found majorly in Somalia. And then from there we come down, we reach Kenya, where we have River Tana. Of course, River Tana comes from the areas around Mount Kenya, and then it also flows into the ocean. Then just after River Tana, we have the River Athi. Of course, River Athi has several other names. You remember we call it Athi, we call it River Galana, and at some point, just before it enters the ocean, it is also called River Sabaki. So this river has two major tributaries, of course. One of them comes all the way from Nairobi. So the main Nairobi River is one of the tributaries of River Athi. You need to note that River Tana is the largest river in Kenya, and then River Athi is the second largest river in Kenya. So after that, we move down and then we reach Tanzania, where we also have a number of rivers. We have River Rufiji, River Ruvuma, River Wami, and River Pangani. Now, all those four rivers are found in Tanzania, and of course, because of that, they all drain their water into the Indian Ocean. So next we have River Zambezi, and as the name suggests, River Zambezi is found in Zambia. Yeah, that is where it's majorly found. And then finally in that list, we have River Limpopo. So River Limpopo is found in South Africa, another major river that drains its water into the Indian Ocean. Of course, looking at the location and the position of those rivers, you can be able to tell which river drains its water where. So apart from the Indian Ocean, we also say that a number of rivers drain their water into the Atlantic Ocean. And because Atlantic Ocean is found on the western side of Africa, now these are rivers which are majorly found on the western wing of Africa and part of the southern wing. To start with, so we have River Kwanza, found in Angola. And then second to that, we also have the River Kunene. Now River Kunene is found in South Africa, but then it flows all the way from the islands also which are in Angola, but then finally it ends up in South Africa where it drains its water into the ocean. And then River Congo, which we said is the largest in Africa, but it is second to River Nile, that is in terms of length. That means it is the largest, but it is the second longest. Remember we said that the length of the river is different from its width or the volume of water that it contains. So River Nile is the longest, River Congo is the largest. Another major river is River Volta. Now River Volta is a major river in Ghana. Of course, it passes through several countries from Ghana to Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast before it finally drains its water. Of course, when you look at this map, you will see the direction of flow of River Volta. Somewhere here we have Ghana, and around this place we have Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast finally before it drains its water. So next we have River Niger, which we also said is the third largest river in Africa. It has a number of tributaries. One of them is called River Benue. So Benue is one of the major tributaries of River Niger. Of course, most of it flows through Niger and that. So apart from that, we have River Senegal. So River Senegal is found in Senegal. And then River Gambia flows all the way from Fontajalon Plateau, which is found in Guinea. And then from there, it flows through Senegal and finally to Gambia before emptying its water into the Atlantic Ocean. And then finally, of the rivers that flow into the Atlantic Ocean, we have River Orange. Now, River Orange is also found in South Africa. Of course, we will give that summary later. Now, those are the major rivers that flow into the oceans. Now, let's look at the rivers that drain into an inland water body, which is Lake Victoria. Of course, you know that Lake Victoria covers 3 major countries, the biggest portion of it being in Tanzania, then we have Uganda, and the smallest portion being in Kenya. So the inlets of Lake Victoria, in this case, we have the major river, which is River Kagera. Now River Kagera is a bigger river which comes all the way from Burundi, passes through Rwanda, enters Tanzania, and just before it enters the lake, it crosses the border to Uganda. So it enters Lake Victoria through Uganda. And of course, that is the largest inlet of Lake Victoria. So let's cross over to Kenya, where we have the first river is River Sio. Now River Sio flows close to the Kenya-Uganda border. So next we have River Nzoia. Now River Nzoia has 2 major sources. The first source is Mount Elgon and another one is Cherangani Hills. Now Mount Elgon is found in western Kenya, but Cherangani Hills is found in the Rift Valley. So these 2 areas discharge a lot of water, and that makes River Nzoia to be a major river in Kenya. And so for this reason, it causes a lot of floods, especially at the areas around Budalangi. Now that's why you'll hear every now and then that Budalangi floods quite often. Now that is as a result of River Nzoia. Another river is River Yala. Now River Yala comes from the Nandi escarpments, and then it enters the lake through the Winam Gulf. Apart from River Yala, we have River Nyando, because this is a common river, bearing in mind the floods in Nyando. This is a river you know very well. So River Nyando comes from the two forests mostly found within the Rift Valley, that is the Mau forest and the Tinderet forests. So next we have River Sondu, which is also called Miriu. Of course, River Sondu originates from the islands in Kisii. It flows through Homa Bay County, specifically at a region or at a place called Rachuonyo South, where it causes again a lot of floods and then finally enters Kisumu County at a place called Nyakach, where it then finally ends up into the Lake Victoria. And then after River Sondu, we have River Kuja. Now River Kuja comes all the way from the highlands in Nyamira, that is where it is called Gucha, as it comes all the way from Kisii, and then it gets to Luoland, where it's now called Kuja. So it has two names, the Gucha River in Kisii, and when it finally reaches Lowland, it's called Kuja River. So River Kuja is later joined by another major river, which is River Migori, and it flows all the way through Migori County before finally reaching Lake Victoria at a place called Kadem Aneko, where it forms a delta at the shores of Lake Victoria. So next we have River Mara. River Mara is a major river which has two major tributaries, one from Kenya and another one from Tanzania. So from Kenya, the river originates from Mau escarpments, areas around Narok, and then flows all the way. And then we also have another one from Tanzania. Now both rivers join, and River Mara empties its water some place around Musoma, that is in Tanzania. Of course, we have several other inlets of Lake Victoria in Tanzania and in Uganda. But then it's important to note the inlets in Kenya, where the first one on top is River Sio and the last one is River Kuja. So that said, other rivers which are worth mentioning, we have River Turkwell. River Turkwell drains its water into Lake Turkana, which is found in the northern part of Kenya. And we also have Ewasunyiro River. Now, Ewasunyiro River drains its water into the Lorian Swamp. Now, this is found in the northeastern part of Kenya. And so, as we said, we only look at the major rivers. Otherwise, we have several other minor rivers that are not captured here, but then they still exist. I want us to look at River Nile. Of course, as we said, River Nile is the longest river in Africa and also the longest in the world, if not second to Amazon River, which is found in Brazil. So River Nile is one of the major rivers even across the world. It may be first, if not second, to Amazon River, which is found in Brazil. So this river is found in the northeastern part of Africa. Of course, its drainage basin is said to cover up to 11 countries. And the 11 countries here, we have Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC Congo, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Southern Sudan, the Republic of Sudan, and Egypt. So River Nile itself obtains its water from all those 11 countries, and that is why it's said to be the longest, even worldwide. This river is the main source of water for Egypt and Sudan. Remember, part of these countries are deserts, and so they use a lot of water from the river for irrigation. This river has two major tributaries. We have the White Nile, whose source is Lake Victoria, and that is its main headwater. And then we have the second tributary, which is the Blue Nile. The Blue Nile also originates from another lake in Ethiopia called Lake Tana. So looking at River Nile, its two sources all originate from lakes. Lake Victoria, which is the largest lake in Kenya, and Lake Tana, which is also the largest lake in Ethiopia. The river flows all the way through the deserts in Sudan and Egypt, and finally empties its water into the Mediterranean Sea, where it ends in a delta. we are going to discuss into details how this river is used. For example, under the topic resources and economic activities, we will be looking at the multi-purpose river projects, that is the Aswan High Dam, which has then given rise to Lake Nasser, which is mostly used by people in the northern part of Sudan and also a good part of Egypt. But then that will be coming up later. Let's have a summary of the rivers and the countries where they are found. So the first one, we have the rivers in Kenya, where we have River Athi and River Tana. Of course, we said Tana is the largest, followed by Athi. So we have River Athi and River Tana, both found in Kenya. When we go to Tanzania, we have River Pangani, River Rufiji, River Ruvuma, and Matunda. So when you hear of Ruru, those are mostly found in Tanzania. And then we have Ethiopia, where we have River Omo, the Blue Nile, Awash River, and Atbara. In Somalia, we have River Juba and Shebeli. Both of them originate from Ethiopia. And then in Senegal, we have River Senegal. In Ghana, we have River Volta. And in Congo, we have River Congo. In South Africa, we have two major rivers, Orange River, which drains into the Atlantic Ocean, and Limpopo River, which drains into the Indian Ocean. Then we have in Nigeria, River Benue, which is a major tributary of River Niger. In Egypt, we have River Nile. And in Niger, we have River Niger. In Chad, there is River Chari. And finally, in Zambia, we have River Zambezi. So rivers in Africa, of course, have a number of uses. And so we say that not many rivers in Africa are used for transport. The main reason why most of these rivers are not navigable, one, is because most of them have what we call rapids, cataracts, and waterfalls. Now this hinders transportation across those rivers. Now some of these rivers also have what we call the water vegetation, that is the water plants. Now this also causes a barrier and so makes these rivers not to be navigable. A good example is what we call the SAD, which is found in River Nile and River Congo. Some of the rivers also have what we call fluctuating water levels. Others are also seasonal, and that is to say that when the water levels keep on fluctuating, that also poses challenges to navigation across such rivers. Now some of these rivers are also narrow and shallow, and so because they are narrow and shallow, transport vessels cannot be used in them. Some of the rivers also have deltas that hinders transportation. And then finally, most of these rivers have river projects, and when there are river projects, for example, the dams and the generation of electricity, now this hinders or obstructs the development of waterways. Now this makes most of these rivers not to be navigable, and we are going to discuss this as we look at the river projects in Africa at large. So with that, I hope the topic rivers is covered, and next we are going to look at the lakes. Thank you so much.